Regular ice cream. Pick up 2 tubs of vanilla and one weighs half what the other does. That's air. Whipped in as the mix freezes. Ice cream sells by volume, so air is the cheapest ingredient a maker has, and federal law caps it at 4.5 pounds per gallon, alongside 10% milk fat. Miss either, and the carton has to say frozen dairy dessert. Premium isn't a legal term at all. It just means less air and more fat. It used to be rich people's food, because making it meant stirring a pot in ice and salt by hand until your arm gave out. Nancy Johnson of Philadelphia ended that in September 1843 with a crank-driven paddle that scraped the cylinder clean as ice formed. 8 years later, a Baltimore milk dealer named Jacob Fussell was stuck with cream nobody wanted. He froze it, built a factory in Seven Valleys, Pennsylvania, and shipped it into Baltimore by train. America's first ice cream factory began as a way to stop wasting milk. Frozen custard. Frozen custard is denser than ice cream and doesn't hit your mouth as cold. The reason is egg yolks. Federal rules say a frozen dessert needs at least 1.4% egg yolk solids before it can be called frozen custard. Below that line, it's just ice cream. Yolks thicken the base and slow the melt, which lets it be churned with far less air and served warmer than a supermarket pint. That's why a scoop from a Culver's counter feels heavy in the cup, and a half-gallon from the freezer aisle feels like foam. In 1919, 3 brothers from York, Pennsylvania, Archie, Claire, and Elton Core, took a milk round and an ice cream machine to the boardwalk at Coney Island. They sold more than 18,000 cones at a nickel each on the first weekend. Their problem was the salt air coming off the Atlantic, which melted the cones faster than people could finish them. Adding egg yolks fixed it. A stand at the 1933 World's Fair in Chicago carried the recipe into the Midwest, where Milwaukee took it up and never let go. The Core family is still selling it on the Jersey Shore. Gelato. Gelato tastes stronger than ice cream while containing less fat. It's made with more milk and less cream, churned slowly so barely any air gets in, and kept warmer in the case. Cold numbs your tongue and fat coats it. So cutting both lets flavor land harder. Lemon gelato tastes sharply of lemon in a way lemon ice cream doesn't. Frozen custard gets its density from egg yolks. Gelato gets it from churning slowly and stopping early. The warmth is also why it's scraped up with a flat paddle rather than scooped. In America, the word means nothing legally. A shop can print it on anything. Its history is legend more than record. Florentine tradition credits the Medici court architect Bernardo Buontalenti with serving a frozen cream at a banquet for visiting Spanish guests in the 1560s, but no document from the period confirms it. Every version of the story comes from retellings written centuries later, and some accounts credit a different court cook entirely. What's better documented is the cafe. In 1686, a Sicilian named Francesco Procopio dei Coltelli opened Le Procope in Paris and sold frozen desserts to anyone who walked in off the street, which had never really happened before. Until then, this was food for courts, not customers. The cafe is still trading today. Soft serve. Soft serve is soft because it never fully freezes. It leaves the machine far warmer than hard ice cream and gets handed over the moment it's made rather than hardened in a freezer first. Most American soft serve also runs at roughly 3 to 6% milk fat, under the 10% line, so legally it isn't ice cream at all. It's a frozen dairy dessert. Frozen custard comes out of a similar-looking machine but carries egg yolks and far more fat, and the swirl isn't decoration. It's what happens when a soft rope of product leaves a nozzle and someone turns the cone. 2 men claim the invention. Over Memorial Day weekend in 1934, Tom Carvel's ice cream truck blew a tire in Hartsdale, New York. Rather than lose the load, he sold it melting to passing drivers, cleared it in 2 days, and worked out that people liked it that way. He opened a store on the same spot in 1936. 4 years after the flat tire, in Kankakee, Illinois, J.F. McCullough and his son Alex ran an all-you-can-eat trial of their own soft formula at a friend's shop and served more than 1,600 people in 2 hours. The first Dairy Queen opened 2 years later. Sherbet. Sherbet lives in a legal band 1 percentage point wide. Federal rules put it between 1 and 2% milk fat. Enough dairy to soften the texture, not enough to make it creamy. Go above 2 and it stops being sherbet, and it doesn't become ice cream until 10, so everything in between has no name. The stranger rule is the acid one. Fruit sherbet is legally required to reach a minimum sourness, measured and written into the regulation. Rainbow sherbet tastes tart because tartness is the law. Sherbet and sorbet are the same word, split in 2. Both trace back to Arabic sherbet, a sweetened drink chilled with snow wherever snow could be had. The Turkish pronunciation carried into English as sherbet. Southern Europe dropped the H and made it sorbetto, which became the French sorbet, which English then borrowed a second time without noticing it already had the word. America ended up with one Arabic noun twice over and handed the two spellings to two different desserts. Sorbet. Freeze fruit juice, and you get a block of ice. Sorbet is that same juice with enough sugar in it to stop that happening. Sugar dissolved in water lowers the temperature at which the water can freeze. So instead of one solid mass, you get millions of tiny crystals suspended in syrup. Most sorbet lands somewhere around a quarter to a third sugar by weight. Too little, and it sets like a brick. Too much, and it never firms up at all. There's no dairy in it, which is the whole of the difference from sherbet. The first written recipes come from Naples. Antonio Latini was steward to the household of the Spanish viceroy there, and when he wrote up his career in the 1690s, he included a short treatise on sorbetti, sugar, snow, and salt, worked into lemon juice, sour cherries, strawberries, chocolate, cinnamon water. He also wrote that in Naples it seemed everyone was born knowing how to make them, including people with no training at all. He wasn't inventing anything. He was writing down what the city already did. Italian ice. The difference between Italian ice and a snow cone is when the flavor goes in. A snow cone is plain ice, shaved, with syrup poured over the top, which is why the last inch is sweet slush and the first mouthful is just cold. Italian ice is flavored before it freezes and churned while it's freezing, so every crystal carries flavor and none of them grow large enough to crunch. That's why you eat it with a spoon rather than drink it out of the bottom. In Philadelphia, it's called water ice, and locals will correct you. It arrived as granita. Sicilians had made it for centuries by freezing sweetened juice and scraping the surface into coarse crystals. Italian immigrants landing in Philadelphia and New York in the early 1900s sold it off pushcarts, and the American version drifted finer and smoother than the Sicilian original. In 1984, a former Philadelphia firefighter named Bob Tumolo started selling it out of a porch window in Bensalem, Pennsylvania, and named the business after his wife, Rita. There are now around 590 Ritas. Frozen yogurt. Yogurt has a federal legal definition. Frozen yogurt has none. No national rule requires it to contain live cultures at all. So whether the tub in front of you has any comes down to the brand and, in a handful of states, local law. The tang is real. It comes from bacteria fermenting the milk before freezing, but nothing obliges those bacteria to still be alive by the time you eat it. Froyo also runs lower in fat than ice cream, and since fat is what keeps ice crystals small, a tub left in the freezer too long turns gritty. The New England dairy H.P. Hood put the first version on sale in the early 1970s and called it Frogurt. It tasted like yogurt, which turned out to be the problem, and it went nowhere. The fix was to make it taste less like yogurt. In 1981, Frank Hickinbotham opened the first TCBY in Little Rock, Arkansas, selling a sweeter, milder version, and by 1990, there were more than 1,600 stores. Then in 2005, a shop called Pinkberry opened in West Hollywood, selling it sour on purpose, and the whole cycle ran again. Turkish stretchy ice cream. You've seen the vendor trick, the long metal rod, the cone snatched back, the ice cream stretching like dough. The tricks are showmanship. The stretch is chemistry. Turkish dondurma is thickened with salep, a flour ground from the tubers of wild orchids, and salep carries a molecule called glucomannan that can hold around 200 times its own weight in water. Add mastic, a resin tapped from trees on the Aegean coast, and you get something firm enough to cut with a knife and slow enough to melt that a vendor can hang it upside down off a rod. In Kahramanmaraş, where it comes from, it's eaten with a fork. Kahramanmaraş sits under mountains that held snow into the summer, and the original was goat's milk, sugar, and salep frozen with it. The orchids have never been farmed successfully, so every gram of salep still comes from wild plants pulled out of the ground. Between 1 and 2,000 of them for a single kilo of powder. They're now protected under international law. Turkey bans their export outright, and pure salep runs upwards of $200 a kilo, which means the stretchy ice cream sold outside Turkey almost never contains any. It's gargum or konjac flour doing the work. Mochi ice cream. Mochi ice cream works because the wrapper isn't really mochi. Plain pounded rice cake goes hard as a rock in a freezer. The skin on these is gyuhi, a mochi dough with sugar and starch syrup worked into the rice flour, and those additions keep it soft and chewy at freezer temperature. Getting that right was the difficult part. The ice cream inside is ordinary ice cream. It's why the wrapper is thin and faintly powdery, and why it gives under your teeth instead of cracking. Japan solved it first. Lotte was a latecomer to an ice cream market that only sold in summer, so it aimed at winter instead. Home heating was spreading through Japanese houses, and people could suddenly eat something cold indoors in January. A marshmallow-wrapped version called wataboshi came out in 1980 and didn't take. Swapping marshmallow for Mochi did. Yukimi Daifuku launched in October 1981 and is still on shelves. The American version came a decade later out of Mikawaya, a Japanese sweet shop in Los Angeles open since 1910 and forced shut when the family was interned during the war. Francis Hashimoto put it into supermarkets in 1993. Plant-based ice cream. Swapping out the milk is the easy part. Fat's real job in ice cream is coating ice crystals as they form and stopping them growing into something you can feel on your tongue, so a base without it turns gritty. Coconut cream carries a lot of fat on its own and works almost straight from the can. Nut and oat milks carry far less. Almond, oat, and cashew versions get there with added coconut or sunflower oil, plus gums like gar and locust bean, which thicken the water so crystals have less room to spread. Turn a non-dairy pint around, and most of the unfamiliar names on the label are doing that one job. Ben & Jerry's spent about 2.5 years on it. The team worked through roughly 60 versions of the base before settling on almond milk, and the first 4 non-dairy flavors went on sale in early 2016. Almond wasn't the end of it. A sunflower butter base followed in 2020, and by 2024, the company had moved its entire non-dairy line onto oat. 3 bases in 8 years, and it still isn't settled. Dippin Dots. Dippin Dots run on the rule underneath every frozen dessert. Freeze it faster and the ice crystals come out smaller. Dripping ice cream mixed into liquid nitrogen at 320 degrees below zero freezes each droplet almost instantly, so no crystal gets time to grow and the bead is smooth the whole way through. The catch is storage. They have to be held below -40, colder than a supermarket freezer runs, which is why you find them at ballparks and theme parks and almost never in a grocery aisle. Kurt Jones wasn't trying to make a dessert. In 1987, he was a microbiologist at a biotech firm in Kentucky, working on probiotic bacteria to put into cattle feed as an alternative to antibiotics, and he needed a way to freeze the cultures without destroying them. Dropping them into liquid nitrogen turned them into loose pellets. He was making ice cream at home with a neighbor when the conversation turned to ice crystals, and he realized the same trick applied. In 1988, he and his wife opened their first retail store in a Lexington, Kentucky shopping center, running the operation out of their hometown of Grand Chain, Illinois. The store failed within a year, but by then, fairs and amusement parks were already buying.